So the next article is about NVIDIA and Intel. This is something that in English we would call a speculative article. So it's about what is this particular thing that's happened? What does it mean? Not so much about the reasons why a market trend. This is about an industry. So let's look at the headline again. So if you remember, headline is supposed to catch your attention, right? So here we have the main idea is that it's a mixed blessing, a good thing and a bad thing. But even in English, it's not really clear what this means and for who. And when it's an Intel's NVIDIA deal, it makes you think, wait, but who is investing in who? And so if you see that, then, in the first paragraph, it should make it very clear who is investing in who. And the final thing to be aware of is that this is all about what it means for Asian chip makers. So this article is all from the point of view of Asian chip makers. So this is from Reuters, which also gives you summaries. It doesn't give you a subheading, it actually just gives you a summary. But it basically does the same sort of thing as what we saw with the last one. So here we have 3 main ideas from the summary. So the revival could ease US scrutiny. Okay, what does this mean? Even in English, it's a bit unclear, but we will look at that as we go. The deal poses a longer-term threat to Asian chip makers. Okay, long-term threat. This is what experts say. And the stock prices of Asia's biggest chip makers, Taiwan's own TSMC, are down a little bit. So this is the main summary. These are the main ideas in the article. Now we know for certain it's NVIDIA's deal in Intel. NVIDIA has invested in Intel, and this is a double-edged sword for Asian chip makers. And then we have the important word as. So as gives us more information. This is going to ease scrutiny as well as boosting competition. Okay, so you've got a lot of information here. If you worry about the second half of the sentence, just go back to the first half, which is where you have the clearest information, which is the most important part, which is that NVIDIA has invested $5 billion into Intel. And this is a double-edged sword for Asian chip makers. That's the most important part. This is the what. The as explains how we're going to understand the what. But at the moment it's confusing because we don't have enough information. So you could just focus on the first half of the sentence. And the second half of the sentence should become clear as we read the rest of the article. So now again, with the second paragraph, we have extra information. We have the details or the meat of what this means. NVIDIA has invested a roughly 4% stake in Intel. Okay, so now, as I said, we have the actual detail. We have the stake itself. So we have information related to the deal. This is important. So again, you remember, we look at the first paragraph, we're like, okay, this is what's happening. NVIDIA has invested in Intel. Second paragraph, how much have they actually invested in terms of the overall proportion? And that's given here. Another thing is that they've both decided to develop PC and data center chips. So second paragraph, the details of the deal. The third paragraph, we're building out from the initial foundations to the more advanced way of looking at this. So the initial foundation is that this was warmly welcomed by Intel investors and their shares went up 23%. And the analysts expect the NVIDIA partnership to help struggling chip maker to make up some ground in artificial intelligence and boost manufacturing capabilities. So that means that generally Intel investors like this. That's the most important part. Maybe a good trick would be just to go through the first paragraph, you're like, okay, understand. Second paragraph, okay, am I able to say that in very simple terms? The main idea is that Intel investors like this. Now we're going to look at it from different perspectives. This article is more about what are the possibilities for NVIDIA and for Intel as a result of this deal. So now we're just going to look at different big players' perspectives. So for TSMC, Intel chugging along is a better proposition than one that fails. If Intel fails, it would only mean that TSMC gets more market share. Another key element that is now introduced into the article is that TSMC and Samsung are both building multi-billion-dollar plants in the US. So what does it mean for them? This massive deal has happened between NVIDIA and Intel. What does it mean for a Korean and Taiwanese chip maker that they are investing in these massive plants in the US? And then it tells you that the shares of both companies are slightly down. Okay, so let's think about this a little bit. So NVIDIA invested in Intel. Intel is struggling. Intel is optimistic about this, or the investors are, but it's not clear what it means for Asian chip makers. Will this mean that the American government doesn't target TSMC or Samsung. And if the Intel attempt fails, maybe TSMC will get a bigger market share. This is the overall what. But the bottom line of this article is that we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So we're just looking at various possibilities. As I said, these are speculative comments. And a journalist's job, as well as explaining things, is also to, as we say in English, throw stories forward, which is just to push stories into what the possibilities of the future might be. So now we enter the so what part of this article, which is, what does this mean? So now we're going to be given a series of different possibilities. The first one is that this is a long-term threat. This means that it's a long-term threat for Asian manufacturers, specifically for TSMC and Samsung, because it means that Intel can strengthen their manufacturing technology. Now we expand on this again, and another person says this could develop into manufacturing deals. You could have more activity coming from NVIDIA and Intel together. So we're just expanding on the same idea with a quote. Journalism, as well as being about new information, old information, twisting it, is also about what's happened, and then maybe someone's opinion is about facts and opinions. And here we're in the situation where we've got opinions from different analysts or experts. Another opinion, another voice. This is definitely bad news for Intel's competitors, aka Samsung and TSMC, because Intel has improved its competitiveness. Then we have this other twist in the article, which is that what does it mean for other parts of the semiconductor supply chain, which is the AMD, which is also a chip design house, could also lose business. And for NVIDIA, AMD is a direct competitor. So now let's think about this a little bit again. So Intel hopes that it will have a stronger position in the market. It's also possible that this could threaten TSMC because NVIDIA will have the possibility of outsourcing chip production. And maybe this could influence other people in the supply chain, like AMD. As always, journalist's job is to ask questions, not to give answers. So how will this end? Who knows? And the quote that's used at the end of the article is a classic way. If you see an article ending in a quote, this is very normal in Western journalism, and particularly in English journalism. It's almost like we end the idea with this floating opinion about what this means. Why do we do that in English? It's because we want to capture the fact that this story is constantly evolving. So again, we end with this, basically with a question again. How will this influence the chip making landscape is still unclear. But, many things are unclear. Journalists don't have the keys to the future, but they can just ask questions on our way there.